Hey everyone, it's Laura here from makingcards.sun.com and welcome to another card making video tutorial. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to create a heat emboss resist background with Distress Oxide ink in Unity stamps. So let's get started. I'm starting out with the Yuletide border background from Unity stamps. Since this is a cling stamp, you need to peel off the white backing sheet first before you can mount it to an acrylic block. So after peeling off this backer sheet, I mounted my stamp to my MISTI tool, and then I'm inking it up with VersaMark ink since I'll be heat embossing this background. After I made this card, I actually was thinking that I could have easily mass-produced this design since the card came together quite quickly, since it just required a little bit of heat embossing and ink blending. So I think that I'll be going back and actually mass-produce this card and then use like different colors for each card to have like a full Christmas card set ready to send out to friends and family. So after I sprinkled on my opaque bright white embossing powder from Wow, I heat set it with my heat tool. It was my favorite part to sprinkle on the embossing powder because it was like magic, because you could see the pattern showing up, and I just really love this pattern. It's really pretty, it's so delicate, and I really loved working with this particular design. Next, I'm adding some color to this design with the Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink from Tim Holtz and Ranger. Notice that I'm using only one color to create this gradient. It just depends on how heavily you apply your ink. So I'm applying my ink more heavy at the edges of my paper, and then when I work my way to the center of the card, I just blend it all out and I don't re-ink my blending tool. So here I'm just going back in with my blending tool to actually darken up those edges a little bit so I can really see a difference between the outside of the card and the inside of the card. To fill up the center of my card, I'm going to use the excess ink on my blending tool without re-inking it. And this way you can get like a really nice and effortless gradient look without having to use 2 or more ink pads. Since Distress Oxide inks are similar to pigment inks, it will actually add a soft layer of ink to your heat embossed designs. So here I'm just using a Kleenex tissue to wipe off all of that ink. When you're using regular Distress inks, you don't need to do this, but you know, the Distress Oxide inks are completely different ink and they're just more intense, more pigmented. So I needed to go back in to clean that away and to actually make the whites of the embossing powder pop. Next, I'm going to create my sentiment piece. I'm using a piece of 40-pound Bazzill vellum, and I prep my paper by adding a coat of kitchen flour to prevent my embossing powder from sticking everywhere. After applying the kitchen flour, I stamped my sentiment with VersaMark ink. This is a sentiment from the Full of Mary stamp set from Unity Stamps. Then I'm sprinkling on my opaque bright white superfine embossing powder from Wow, and I'm heat setting it. And since I prepped that cardstock, and since there's no static cling on this paper, you will be left with a really nice and crisp heat embossed sentiment. Kitchen flour works really great, but you can also use a Martha Stewart powder tool or a little embossing buddy, whatever works for you. After letting that cool down a little bit, I'm using a circle die from Spellbinders to die cut a nice shape to make a fun sentiment banner. I'm also trimming down this piece to 4 inch by 5 1/4. I'm using my Tonic Guillotine paper trimmer. This is my favorite paper trimmer. I've had it for a while now, and it's just a really nice trimmer. It's super sharp, and you have a really clean and crisp cut every single time. Since I wanted to add some dimension, I actually cut another piece of, or just cut a piece of fun foam to the same size. So I cut that piece of fun foam to 4 inch by 5 1/4, and then I'm adhering it to the back of my panel, and then I can adhere this piece to a standard size note card with my ATG from Scotch. So my circle, or my sentiment circle, warped up a little bit from the heat, from my heat tool, so I just put that under some books to flatten out, and then in the meantime I finished off this card with some Tonic Nuvo drops. I'm adding some drops here and there to add a pop of color and a pop of shimmer and shine. The colors I'm using are Red Berry, Honey Gold, and White Blizzard. So White Blizzard is the one I'm using over here. Red Berry is obviously the red one, and then the Honey Gold is the gold one. I'm also using my Spectrum Noir clear shimmer pen to add some sparkle to some of the berries, and then I'm also adding a coat of Tonic Nuvo Crystal Glaze to it for some extra dimension and extra shine. Finally, I'm carefully adhering my circle sentiment piece with Tonic Nuvo Deluxe Adhesive. This is a clear drying craft glue, so you don't have to worry about it being visible on the back of this vellum piece. And then after adding those tiny little dots of glue, I'm carefully positioning it on my card and holding it down for a while to make sure it's nice and flat. So that finishes up my card for this video. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll be back very soon. Bye bye!